Yeah, started off at Chelsea. How was that? We think you would have been in the same youth team as Leon Knight, were you?
Uh, no, he was the year below, but Leon and I obviously knew each other for a period before that because obviously within the club, the School of Excellence as it was called then, but also I earned a scholarship to Lilleshall, which was a national football school at the time, and Leon was the year below. So his year was the last year to go through it before Howard Wilkinson did a massive report on youth football. I don't know if you will remember that or be aware of that, but they brought Howard Wilkinson in. He did this massive assessment of youth football and said that Lilleshall and the FA National School was, not a waste of money, but, every club should be doing that thing, basically. So I was there for 2 years, and that was where I first also played for England schoolboys and 16s, 17s, 18s. And Leon was my junior, as they called it. And obviously then we were at Chelsea together as well.
So was he as mad then as as everyone sort of knows him?
Yeah. You could probably get a lot of players to speak to a lot of players who played with him, and they'll all have a Leon Knight story. I resisted getting involved in something on Twitter a little while ago where he put out how he'd fly kicked me one day training, which I have absolutely no recollection of. But because what I want to say, well, do you remember the time I clotheslined you in the Toulon when we were in the hotel and you being a prick? And I broke your what was it? It wasn't a Discman. It was like you had one of those, the MP3 player thing, when that smashed in you. You got smashed on the floor. But I resisted that because I don't really want to get involved. I'm too old for that shit now.
What was it like in that youth team? So obviously, would that have been with John Terry and all that?
Yeah. So John's a year older than me. So there may have been a period where the three of us may have played together. But John soon sort of accelerated on, and it was clear that he was obviously destined for bigger things, and very, very quickly kind of sort of found his way into the first team squad and the first team. Just a really like aggressive, hard player, would I have anticipated him going on to do what he's done? Probably not. But whatever you think of him as a person or whatever, what a fantastic career he's had.
You can't take anything away from how he was as a player, can you?
He worked very hard on his game. I think he knew his limitations. And I just remember we had a youth team manager who was a real hard Scottish bastard called Jim Duffy, and he sort of took John under his wing a little bit. And he would just have him heading balls. They would just be out there just heading balls, and his aggression was encouraged at all times, And obviously I played a lot of reserve games as well because I was pushed into the reserves myself, and John was there for a period before he was involved with the first team, and obviously was a period where he was involved with both, and he would be like a free kick, near the halfway line or inside your own half, and he put the ball in, he'd sort of whisper to me, "Where's the keeper stood? Like, where's their keeper?" And I'd say, "Well, he's probably on the edge of the area." I think he scored two. There was at least 2 times where he scored a goal, just pumped it. And obviously the opposing goalkeeper wasn't expecting him to shoot, So I think I was fortunate where I was involved with international sort of scenes. So you would see the best players that were around, and I think you then got an eye for who was that kind of quality player, and John certainly, without sounding patronising or belittling, he was certainly, of that level. I wouldn't personally say Knight he was, but John without a doubt was.
So was there anyone else in that team? Because you heard like a few stories of players that are like shit hot as a youngster, and then they never quite live up to it. Was there anyone in that team that sort of springs to mind there?
In the Chelsea youth team?
Yeah. Or anyone really that you've played with that never really sort of kicked on from where they were as a youngster.
Well, yeah, I mean, you bear in mind. So when I was at Lillishall from the age of 14, so I did my last 2 school years there and lived there on site and everything. You know, there's 16 lads, 2 goalkeepers and 14 outfield players, and I'm in a group WhatsApp with those guys. Joe Colby and one of those, you know, and there were players from that 16 lads who never played a professional game, you know, never got beyond the youth or reserve teams at their individual clubs, and they're all I think most of them were all at Premiership clubs, you know. So even then, when you're say being told that at 14, 15, 16 you're within that top percentage in the country, that doesn't then transpire into being guaranteed being a full pro first team player or whatever it might be, you know. But on the flip side of that, I obviously have reflected a lot on my own career and, you know, how I sort of was on this trajectory and it just kind of went, you know, that I just wonder whether being told at that young age that somebody thinks you're one of the best young players around, whether that is actually a healthy thing or not. I'm sort of a bit undecided on that, really, you know.
Yeah. It was like you mentioned the thing there you said about the coach working with John Terry, just heading balls. Then you can't even do that now. Like they've banned that now with kids of a certain age. I know, like you said, you're a little bit older than that at that time, like 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just I think we're developing a player like you said there. Like one of the words you used was like he was just hard. Even as a youngster, he was a hard defender. I don't think you're going to get that anymore. Like with the little things they're doing to take that out of the game.
Yeah, look, I mean, to be honest, personally, from a goalkeeping point of view, I think there's bigger problems than that going on. You know, there's this thing now within football where, you know, the level of coaching within goalkeeping, youth goalkeeping, is so poor. We could probably do a whole other podcast on that. I could, you know, because I've not only have I believed that for a while, I've seen it last season. My son, who's now 16. He stepped away from football after a bad experience at Swindon when he was younger at Swindon's academy. He then had to battle with, he's got type 1 diabetes. That was only diagnosed a couple of years ago. And sort of this time last year, he said to me, look, Dad, I want to give it a go again. I was like, okay, fine. You know, I said, you know, what do you want to achieve? And he said, well, I want to, you know, be a pro, you know, all of that, you know, get an apprenticeship or a scholarship as they call it now. So well, it's a big ask, you know, it's a massive ask to have a standing start. We you know, so I've last season I started coaching at the local non-league club in Swindon, where I'm originally from. Well, I don't live there. I live down in Christchurch. But started coaching now. I was coaching at Hereford previously, and that was fine for me. 1 or 2 nights a week, that's enough for me. So he came in and trained with me. He then got a trial at Forest Green through Chris Barks, because he was the youth team manager there.
Yeah.
After going to an open day session, he then went to a couple of other clubs. I won't name them, but the level of young goalkeeper coaching is extremely poor, to the point where it really gets my, you know, it's the one thing that will set me off, you know, and I'll go off on a tangent, you know. But the problem is, I think the FA created this culture where, you know, if you've done the badges, and fair play, if you've done all the badges and you've got all the qualifications, that's great. You know, so my son was within one of these training sessions, got talking to the goalkeeper coach, and he said, oh, you know, I'm just interested to know what your background is. And the last thing the guy had done was been released by a club at 15 years old. That was his last involvement in professional football. You know, and I think especially within, and this is probably controversial, but, you know, the goalkeeping for me is the most difficult position on the pitch, because there is a massive psychological element to it, and there's a massive element of empathy to it as well. If great, if you've got the coaching badges, fair play to you, no issue with that. But if you haven't been in the situation where you've made a mistake in front of thousands of people, you know, and you've experienced that and how that feels, and the abuse that comes with it, and that sitting there, you know, after the game in the changing room at home, trying to sleep that night, if you haven't been in that mental headspace, I really struggle to see how you can be the best coach you can, because you're not going to have that experience of that, you know, because it's a very, very difficult position to be in, you know, as an individual or as a kid or anybody, as an adult, you know. how you would police that, I don't know. But it concerns me that there's not enough ex-pros coaching young goalkeepers. You know, I think for me, that's a concern.
It's funny you mentioned that, actually, because I don't know if you played with him. We had Ted Smith. Did you play with him?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about giving Ted a call because Ted was coming through when I was at the club. I think he may have been, within the School of Excellence or Academy, whatever it was called then. And I really liked Ted. I thought he was a really good kid. If you remember during my season, they'd released Lee Turner, the goalkeeper coach, to save money. So I was trying to get involved. Terry Mason was involved with the academy. And Ted, when I was aware of Ted and I'd spoken to Ted, and I think I even spoke to him after I'd left the club. It's really sad. I've only read what has been written, and everything, but again, it's a prime example of how difficult being a professional footballer is. But I think being a goalkeeper is potentially even harder, because there's such a, and obviously everybody who's played in any other position will argue the same thing, no doubt, that psychologically it's tough. But I think goalkeeping is the toughest, without a shadow of a doubt.
I would have to agree with you. I would, because you fit a goalkeeper makes a mistake, 99.99% of the time it results in a goal. Anyone else makes a mistake, somebody somewhere can cover your arse a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I think that but it's and that's the public side of it. And that's what the fans and TV and everybody else will see. What they don't see is what happens at home afterwards. How that affects you, how that affects your family, your child, your wife, or your girlfriend, or whatever that might be. Because knowing that there's a chance you might then get dropped, and that might be you out of the team for the next few months. Depending on the situation of the club you're at. So it's a real shame. Obviously, Ted's mature enough to have made his decision. I'm pretty sure I've got his number. I may pick the phone up to him and just see how he is, really. But I'm sure he's probably got plenty of other people that he can do that with. But it's one of the many sad stories of football, isn't it? I think the thing is now it's even more highlighted, isn't it, with some of the the mental health side of things that's starting to kind of come through and be more sympathised with, shall we say?
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to go back to after your release from Chelsea. So
that again was an interesting time. I kind of saw the writing on the wall a little bit with it, and I got released by Chelsea on whatever day it was, the Tuesday or the Wednesday, and the day after I was named in the England '21 squad. So it was quite a strange, to have that one day to then get a phone call the next. So David Platt selected you for the under-20. And I'd always been involved in the England. At one stage, I believe, if I remember rightly, I was the most capped England youth goalkeeper when there was less games back then. And I played a lot. I played like 50 international games, I think. So that was great. So I was in the shop window to a certain extent, and my agent at the time spoke to David Platt, and he tipped him off to say, yeah, Rhys is going to play. Rhys will play. I will play for the 21s, which was like, because I think Robinson and Kirkland were both injured, who were guys that I was up against, and the difference with them is they were both playing in the Premiership at that stage, so it was quite a tough sort of thing to break into, because I wasn't playing first team. I'd been on loan, but I wasn't playing first team football regularly, not at the level they were, certainly.
What's that like? Sorry, just been interrupted. What's that like playing for England, like under 21s? I guess that's the next best privilege, isn't it? So
yeah, that's the one thing that when I do sit and think about, I've got a cabinet just there. It sits in this room because I couldn't get it upstairs when I moved into this house. But in that cabinet, I've got my England. A couple of my friends call it my ego cabinet, but it's got my England caps in there. My dad's got a couple, and I'm immensely proud of that. Do you know what I mean? And I think I said to somebody recently, when I first moved down to this area and I started the new job in this area, a couple of guys came around that I work with, and when you see their reaction to that, you go, oh yeah, like that. That's quite a big deal. But obviously, where you kind of get a bit conditioned to it to a certain extent. But yeah, I I genuinely don't think there's a better feeling standing there, you know, when the national anthem's playing, knowing at that moment you've been selected. So saying, in somebody's opinion, you are the best young goalkeeper in England.
The best in
their
your
opinion
position,
at that
yeah.
moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty cool.
On the flip side of that I think eventually caused me a problem in my later career, you know, because, you know, talk about time when I get to Southend, you know, and I wasn't selected to play in the first game of the season. That, you know, you get to that point, I was embarrassed to be the number 2 goalkeeper at Southend, you know. That was kind of how I felt at that point, you know, and I think all the success I had at a young age set me up for a fall later in my career, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah. So would you say that Swindon was certainly the longest, like, sustained period you had as a first choice keeper?
Which is incredible, really. It wasn't how I envisaged that to sort of pan itself out, you know. But so I played for the under-21s. I spoke to Sam Allardyce at Bolton. I spoke to Glenn Roeder at West Ham. I spoke to Sturrock at Plymouth. I spoke to loads of managers and that, you know. And I then got a phone call from Fraser Digby, who was a goalkeeper that played for Swindon when I was a kid, and I'd grown up watching. But I then met for the first time at QPR a season or 2 before, when I went on loan from Chelsea. So I've walked into QPR, and my childhood hero is the number 1 goalkeeper that I've got to try and displace, you know, which is amazing, you know. And at the time then, Fraser was working in the marketing department at Swindon. And the phone went. He said, "Look, you know, would you be interested in speaking to Swindon?" And you know, it was one of those things where things just seemed to fall. It was my hometown club. My wife at the time was about to give birth to my son. And it was a chance to come home after being away from home for 6 or 7 years, you know, and be surrounded by family during the period when my child was born, my only child. So, you know, instead of going for, you know, my dad says to me now, you know, instead of going and signing at Bolton for £3,000 a week, I went and signed at Swindon for hundreds rather than thousands, you know. But the mindset was that play every week, you know, build my stock as much as I could. Hopefully that went well, to then kick on again, you know. All that time whilst being surrounded by my hometown people and friends and family, you know. And that was the idea behind it, you know.
What division was that in then?
League One.
Okay.
And the first season we missed out on getting to the playoff final by something like 30 seconds. Brighton equalised against us with like 30 seconds to go in the extra time of the playoff second leg, which took it to penalties, and we lost on penalties. So it was almost the perfect scenario, and it all worked itself out. And yeah, and it didn't after that, unfortunately. So
killer. So just shifting on then to how you ended up at Southend. Obviously, we've had like somebody's asked, with the well documented financial troubles that we'd been going through at that point. Did that obviously it didn't put you off, because you did eventually sign for the club. So first of all, did you meet Paul Sturrock at Swindon? Because he would obviously been manager here.
So that's an interesting one. So we got relegated in 2006, and my contract was up, and I was 24. So obviously the Bosman thing kicked in at that point. I'd clean swept the Player of the Year awards, and thought, okay, all right, well, I had some offers, and I didn't really want to abandon ship. But then there was like this silence from the club, where they then got rid of Ife Anora, who was like the caretaker after they'd sacked Andy King earlier in the season. And then it became apparent that Dennis Wise was getting the job. So Dennis Wise got the job, and I'm sat there waiting for my phone to ring, you know, as at that time, the club goalkeeper, the Player of the Year, and all of this jazz. Known him from Chelsea, obviously, had worked, you know, we knew, you know, he obviously knew me and knew who I was, you know. It took him 2 weeks to call me. And I think at that point the alarm bells were ringing a little bit, and you know, I had this ridiculous conversation where I said, "Look, I'm being offered this at Blackpool, where I ended up going. If you can match that, I'll stay." And I knew, and they could afford it, because I knew what some of the other players were earning there. Do you know what I mean? And he came out this line, "Well, I'm not having you hold a gun to my head, so I'm not trying to. You know what I mean? I'm trying to get the best deal for myself, you know. And I went, do you know what? Don't worry about it, sort of thing. Like, you know, and it got a bit shitty on the phone. And I went and made the biggest mistake of my career and signed at Blackpool, and will always regret that to my dying breath. Unfortunately, my career never really recovered from that decision. Unfortunately,
why was that so bad?
I knew I'd made a mistake as soon as I got there, and and it was a big life lesson for me that I've always kind of stuck with since then. That the day I was signing for them, I was up staying at a friend's house in Southport, and I was going off to sign the contract, which, you know, was really good money for me at that time, and it was like a 2-year, possibly 3-year contract, you know. So it all looked on paper to be a good decision. That they had a new chairman who was going to pump a load of money into the club. The guy they've recently been to court with, the Latvian guy. I don't know if you read about that. Yeah. And I just had this feeling that I was making a mistake, and I phoned my dad. I said, "Look, this doesn't feel right. There's something about, I just got this feeling." And he's like, "You know, look, you know, it's this, it's that, it's the best offer on the table." And obviously I went for it, and got stitched up out of relocation money by the chairman. The Oyston guy, who's a complete tosser, stitched me out of thousands of pounds within the first couple of weeks. The training ground was shit. The manager was a prick. You know, it was like everything about it was when I just couldn't wait to get out of there, you know. And it was the only time in my career where I acted up to get out of the club eventually, like 18 months later. But I just knew I had to be selfish and do that, you know. But yeah. You know, but that fast forward that to the end of my career, when my last season, I just felt like it was up. You know, enough's enough. Like, you know, and I had this opportunity to go and work for Porsche, and went with my gut instinct. So, you know, retired a lot younger than I probably would have thought I would have done. You know, when I was much younger. Do you know what I mean? I imagine playing till my age I am now, but yeah, I think I just went with my thing that enough was enough.
So who was the manager at Blackpool?
Simon Grayson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he gets mixed reviews, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does get very mixed reviews.
Look, you know, I had this problem where the chairman had told me. So you may or may not know, when you move clubs, you're able to claim up to £8,000 of relocation fees. That can cover rent, curtains, removals, carpets, whatever is linked to that. You can claim for it. So they said, look, there's 4,000 in the contract, but we'll give you the 8. Don't worry about that. That's just what's in the contract. Okay, fine. Didn't know any different. Didn't really know them, but had no reason not to trust them, you know. So obviously moved up there, went through all that, bought a house, you know, started handing these receipts in, and the kept going, well, hang on a minute, you've had your £4,000. I went, yeah, but you said I could have up to 8, the maximum. Yeah, no, you can't. So straight away, with me, I am quite black and white. I was done. At that point, I was done. You know what I mean?
Already killed you.
And you know, I despised the place. I went to Grayson. I said, look, you need to help me out here. And he didn't want to know. Did not want to know. Like, you know, and you know, looking back now, maybe I should have dealt with it differently. Maybe I should have just got on with it, gone sod it, do it, get on with it. But it really like rankled me like massively. And I also had down tools, but mentally I was you know, not committed to that at all. Like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, how can you be? How can you be committed to work for someone like that? I don't think anyone would blame you.
Yeah, I'll make you right. So it was Millwall after that, wasn't it?
Yeah, so then I got and it's weird how football, you know, can really turn in the space of a day. I'd come home from training at Blackpool, was sat on my sofa at home, and phone went, my agent, Millwall want you to go there on loan. They're having a bit of a nightmare down the bottom of League One. They want to sign you. They need a goalkeeper, like, you know. I was like, right, but you need to get down there tonight because you're playing tomorrow night against Nottingham Forest. So it was like, right, fuck, like, so bit of negotiation with the club and that to get out of there, and I sort of tried to play hardball because I thought, well, bollocks to them, like, you know. And then by 10 o'clock that night, I was in some supporter's house's spare bedroom, bedding down, like, you know. Played the next night against Nottingham Forest and like got man of the match, and was buzzing, like, you know, it's brilliant, like, do you know what I mean? You know, and that was the season Forest were in League One. So to give you a short, again, this for me was a pivotal moment in my career. Played 22 games. These figures are burnt in my head. Played 22 games, clapped 7 clean sheets in those 22 games. Their average goal, I think, conceded per game was about 1.9 before I got there. I worked out in those 22 games, the average goals because it was like 0.9. So we played the last game of the season at Swindon, got dogs abuse because it was my first game back at Swindon. And the manager said, look, can you come in early on Monday? Because I obviously want to have a chat with you, like, you know. So I'm thinking, brilliant, like, you know what I mean? I've resurrected my career. I think I've done well. You know, the club's avoided relegation. They were in the relegation zone when I got there. Bang, 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 brilliant, like, you know. So I'm thinking, how much am I going to accept? What will I sign for? You know, all this. He phoned me today. He said, could you come in a bit earlier, like 9:15, something like really early? And I was like, yeah, fine, no problem. So got to the training ground, went into his office, and Kenny Jackett was the manager. So he's another one, another nasty piece of work. And bear in mind, he'd said to my agent at the time, earlier, 10 games to go, my agent phoned him and said, look, you know, because my contract was up. They'd taken over my contract at Blackpool and all this. He said, you know, Rhys has done really well. Really pleased with what he's done for us, you know, since he signed. You know, let's just get the season done and we'll sort something out, like, you know. So I had that in the back of my head. I thought I'd done well. I walk in his office. I sit down. He said, yeah. He said, look, we're going to go with somebody else next season. Thanks for what you've done. Like that. Like, and it was like, and I literally got up. I didn't say a word to him. I got up and I just slammed his door and just walked out the training ground and got in my car. I phoned my dad, because obviously I'd spoken to him and we're going, like, should I accept? What would I accept? What's he going to say? I phoned him. He went like, that was quick. I was like, yeah, he's just like, he's just like told me to like get lost, like,
just binned you off.
Like what? Like what? I'm like, yeah, like, you know. So I wound myself up on the conversation. I literally swung my car around in the middle of the road in London. I'm going to kill him. Like, you know, U-turned in this mazy, busy road, drove back to the training ground, steaming. Like, I was going to go and kill him, like, you know. And the goalkeeper coach must have seen me drive back in and kind of intercepted me and bear hugged me back to my car. Like, he's like, don't, you know, my dad's going, don't, like, as I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. I think it was just such a blow, you know, because I thought I'd resurrected myself from a really bad experience at Blackpool. And to be told, like, you know, see you later, I was just, gutted. That for me was another real pivotal moment in my career, I think, you know, where it went sort of tits up, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in the way that to do it like that as well. He's another one again. Jackett gets mixed reviews. It's just a weird.
Not a good man.
Because he must know that you're gonna have those thoughts going through your head. He obviously knows that you've done well, so they know they're playing with your emotions like that.
Oh, it's scandalous. Yeah, absolutely scandalous. You know, and I had a lot of players call me after that, on that day or the day after, to say, like, what happened? And I'm like, look, that's what he's not one of these managers, a popular manager within the club that he works at. You know, certainly when I was at Millwall, he wasn't. And you know, but he gets success, doesn't he? You know, you can't argue wherever he's been. He tends to get, you know, success. So
he's got a good CV.
Sticks with what he knows, doesn't he? You know, and you have to be ruthless as a manager, but you know, I think there's a duty of care to your players, certainly. Like, do you know what I mean?
No, definitely.
Yeah, what do you reckon? That's like an ego thing. Do you reckon?
I think it's just an arsehole thing, to be honest with you. I don't know. You know, there was previous with me and him, because he was the assistant manager at QPR when I got taken on loan there, and that was quite a big wake-up call for me, going into QPR with Ian Holloway and him as assistant. And I don't think he liked me. Like, I don't think he liked me as a person. I think he signed me begrudgingly for Millwall, and you know, I think that was probably always his plan all along. Do you know what I mean? And obviously just kept me sweet because he needed me to do a job for him, like, which I think I did. You know.
Yeah. So after that, then you ended up at Bradford.
Yeah, and that was one of my most enjoyable seasons. Played for Stuart McCall, who was the complete opposite to the other two managers I mentioned. My favourite manager I played for. What a great guy. You know, what a fantastic man.
He comes across a good guy, actually, doesn't he?
Yeah, brilliant. Like, you know, fantastic. Nigel Martin was my goalkeeper coach, which was brilliant. You know, somebody like that. You know, he couldn't serve because his foot was knackered. He had a broken bone in his foot, which is why he retired. But for me, at that age, to be able to go and say, "What do you think of that?" or "Talk to me about that," was fantastic. Like, you know what I mean? So everything about that, I lived in a lovely place, the highest village in England, out in the middle of nowhere. As a family, I think we were happy there. You know, and everything around it was great. Played like 49 games that season. I got one of the Player of the Year awards, but then again, you know, we missed out on the playoffs by about, I think, three points. If we'd have got in the playoffs, we would have got TV money, which would have kicked the club on, because earlier in the season we had a game called off due to snow, and lost the money. So basically, at the end of the season, the chairman went, anybody who's on more than £1,000 a week has to go. And I was in that bracket. You know, so you play those games. I thought, again, and I had a really good relationship with the Bradford fans. I went back there with, actually, I think Southend that season, a couple of seasons later, we're back with Southend and got a standing ovation as I warmed up when Glenn was injured, you know, and that was like, you know, you think like, oh, what, you know, if only, like, do you know what I mean? If only I could have stayed longer. And, you know, work with Stuart McCall, continue working with Nigel Martin, you know, which was fantastic for me. And obviously wasn't meant to be, you know. So, and that really was the last time I enjoyed football, is the honest answer. And then went to Bristol Rovers late in pre-season, wasn't really fit enough, and again was just used as a backup. And I'm not really one for being a backup goalkeeper. I don't enjoy that experience. And then you find me at Southend, which I know was your question about 10 minutes ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. So there was obviously a lot of very public financial struggles, no team. Like,
the reality was,
Sturrock turns up, clicks his fingers, and a team turn up.
Yeah, I didn't really have a lot of choice. There wasn't many offers on the table for me at that stage. You know, it was a case of my only real option, like, do you know what I mean? And you know, was sort of happy to sign. And I again, you know, and Glenn was great. Glenn Morris did great, and he, you know, did really well that season in terms of playing. I thought I'd done well in pre-season, and I remember at the time, and you tell me otherwise, but I thought I had a good pre-season. I think we played Derby, I think, and I played well in that game. And I thought I'd done well. And before the first game of the season, to be told I wasn't playing and Glenn was playing, I remember quite shocked at that. And that really, again, and my tolerance level at that point after my previous few years was pretty low. So that really, I was gutted about that. Do you know what I mean? Because again, I can't, you know, it's 10 years ago now, you know, but I remember thinking I'd done well, and I think I was genuinely shocked not to be named in the first team of the season, and Glenn played, you know. But again, Glenn did great, you know. I'm not knocking him at all, you know. And we had a good working relationship, you know.
You are right, sorry, Button. You are right. I remember at the time on the Southend fan website, and everyone thought you'd be number one. Well, the majority of people.
Oh, really?
One.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you know, it was. Yeah, I was gutted about that. Because again, you know, every opportunity you get, you think, right, okay, I'm back in here. I'm back on it. Here we go. Like, do you know what I mean? And that enthusiasm you have is up there, and then it just gets blown out the water.
Yeah.
And I think. I've thought about it a lot, and I think just broaden it a little bit. I think, you know, what you end up doing as a professional footballer is you build this armour up. You know, you build this tough exterior up to get you through professional football. I think the longer you have the armour, the heavier it gets. You know, so the older you get, the harder it gets, and the blows get harder the older you get. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're not quite as resilient as you were when you were younger. And I think, you know, that was a kick in the balls a little bit, you know, and again, the problem is then when you get a chance, you know, when I then got to play, you know, you have that air of desperation about you, you know, because you're so keen to take the opportunity and you rev yourself up so much for that opportunity, that it almost then impedes you a little bit, like, do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
So you say you had, I guess that this must be a thing with goalkeepers everywhere, but is there like an unwritten rule between like the goalkeepers, like the GK union, like, well, it's like, we're not picking the team? Because it's like, you obviously, you can have 4 defenders, 4 midfielders, whatever. There's only 1 goalkeeper. So is it difficult to really sort of keep a good working relationship with the other goalkeepers when you're in the team?
I think it depends on the personalities. You know what I mean? I never really fell out of any goalkeeper that I was at a club with, from memory. And I always tried to get on well with the young lads. I think that's something I've found since I've started coaching a little bit. You know, is that I think I definitely am. I'm able to communicate with, you know, apprentice age goalkeepers. You know, and 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old lads, and hopefully, I'd like to think hopefully Danny Bentley would back that up. You know, Ted might back that up as well from the experience I had with him. So I would always try and do that. And obviously then Lee Turner went during that season. And I kind of just took over the goalkeeping sessions, really. Sturrock tried to do it a couple of days, and that was fucking horrendous. And he was like, I've got my goalkeeper coaching badge, like, you know, and sort of Glenn and I looked at one another and was like, oh shit, like, you know what I mean? And, but yeah, it only lasted 1 or 2 sessions, and I think we gave him the impression that no, you're okay, like, you know. Yeah.
On the whole, how was Sturrock to work with?
I found him personally frustrating because he wasn't one. I don't think he was one for man management. You know, when I was dropped on those couple of occasions after being in the team, there was no come up to my office on the Friday or whatever, or talk. He just named the team and I wasn't in it. And I wasn't really keen on that kind of style of management personally. You know, I mean, I think that personal touch goes a long way with players. You know, in my opinion, I think. The stories I'd always heard about him, you know, prior to working with him, I think unfortunately his illness had kind of caught up with him at the point when I got to work with him. You know, he was probably, and you know, even Bark said that to me. You know, he was a bit of a shadow of his former self. You know, and he was obviously trying to manage his medication and everything else. You know, so look, you know, what I would say I will always hold him in high regard because. After the Southend season, I went on trial back at Bradford and I bust my knee really badly and ended up having an operation. And he allowed me to go back into Southend the following season to do my rehab with Ken Clarkson. And he didn't have to do that. So I will always be very grateful for that. And I'll always, you know, if he ever asked me to do anything for him or help him out, I would always, you know, look to return that gesture, you know. So, massive respect for him, what he did for me afterwards, but disappointed at times with how I was treated, you know. But you know, it is what it is, and you know.
Yeah, and obviously this is something that we're about to move on to in much more detail. We touched on it very briefly earlier with the mental health struggles for footballers.
Yeah.
But we had a conversation earlier, like before we were recording this, about supporters and the role they can play, particularly with a goalkeeper.
Yeah, I think, you know, what I've learned a lot in the last, where are we now? 5 months since Christmas with Chris. I look at things very, very differently, and you know and I've seen some amazing gestures from people in relation to Chris. I've also seen a couple of really shit things, like, you know what I mean? And people, you know, there are definitely people out there who like to attach themselves to grief and you know, that kind of wallowing element of it, like, do you know what I mean? You know, you go back to my you know, so let's make this relevant. When I played, I remember playing in a game and I had a horrendous experience where we played at home and I was playing and this shot was hit at me and it's hit this divot in front of me and gone over me and gone in the goal. And then something else happened. That was probably like when I was dropped after that, and I played at Lincoln away and made a bad mistake for a goal, you know. And you know, you get a lot of abuse, which is fine in itself. But you know, there's you know, I have no problem with people. You know, supporters will pay their money. You know, it's a massive release for them, for a lot of them, on a Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday night, whenever it is. You know, but then what? And I think obviously social media was in its infancy when I played, thank God, because I don't think I probably would have dealt with that very well. You know, but sometimes I'll see something, you know, about me, and I've seen it related to Southend. You know, where I can't, whatever I've seen, and then you scroll and go, oh yeah, he was shit, or he was fucking useless. Like, do you know what I mean? You know, and you think, yeah, okay, but then sure as shit, some of these people would no doubt would have been, you know, offering their condolences in regards to what happened with Chris, you know. And again, that's fine, and that's you know, the right thing to do. But are these people? I'm not saying all people do it. I'm saying there will be people who do both of those things. You know, and I think I find it a little bit, you know, hypocritical. You know, I think people need to have just a little bit more thought at times. You know, that have a rant, have a moan. You know, but I think there needs to be more awareness of what that effect that has on players. Do you know what I mean? Especially when they're your own players. You know what I mean? It's like going outside and keying your own car, isn't it? You know what I mean? It defies logic, doesn't it? You know, why would you abuse somebody who is no doubt trying their very best to do well for your club? You know, and yeah, of course, not every player has got a deep emotional attachment to a club, and it's a job, like, you know, any job is. You know, so. But I guarantee you, every player when he's out there is doing the best he can at that moment. Do you know what I mean? And it might not always be the best. You know, it might not work out like that. But you know, and people are very quick to, you know, when something bad happens or somebody passes away or somebody, you know, ultimately commits suicide, that they're very quick to then go, "That's terrible. That's awful." You know, are they applying that same thought pattern in the opposite instance, you know, where they're giving people a bit of stick, you know? And I just think there needs to be, I don't know, you know, that's just it's a very sensitive subject to me, because obviously what I've witnessed in terms of the fallout of Chris's death, and obviously how it's affected me personally as well, you know?
Yeah. No, it's true. It's like there was, well, the very, like the high profile death with Caroline Flack. You know, she, about a month, 6 weeks previous to that, she was getting battered for, you know, allegedly having a fight with her boyfriend.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
then everyone's like offering condolences when she died, when it's like, you know, you've possibly contributed to her doing what she did because of what you said.
Yeah, you know, and look, you know, we all say and do things that we regret in hindsight. You know, I certainly have. You know, and
no, of course.
You know, I just think at times, you know, and I'm sure you'll have read things or people that, you know, will have commented on things about, oh, isn't that awful? Isn't that terrible? Knowing full well that they'll do the battering bit of it prior to that. Do you know what I mean? You know, so I think, you know, it's becoming more accepted and more, the awareness level has raised massively in the last 12 months, 24 months, you know, with players and mental health, you know. It's very easy to go, yeah, mental health, mind, charity, you know, let's all get behind that. But it's not just about donating money, is it, or retweeting something or backing something. It's about behaviour and how you treat people prior to that point, because that's the ultimate. But what I would say, just to caveat that, is with what happened with Chris, I personally, my own opinion is that what he was struggling wasn't, I don't think was stopping playing football. I think there were other things that you know, that were contributing factors.
Yeah, because it's like, as well, bringing it back to like a general football thing, and where fans can like go a bit too far at times. It's like, say for example, someone's given you a bit of stick, and then later on that night they see you filling up your car. They're not going to say a word to you. Then they're not going to say a word to you.
Yeah, it's that mob mentality, isn't it? And people feel quite brave within the mob. And, you know, I play games and probably, you know, you've made a mistake, and the next one you catch, you get that ironic cheer.
Yeah.
And that always used to really, always used to really annoy me.
Like, it's not helping.
Yeah.
What exactly? You know, and any player, do you know what I mean? You know, and yeah, you'll see players who don't look like they're trying very hard, but everybody does things differently, don't they? Do you know what I mean? You know, and I think unfortunately, the very dangerous thing within footballers is that if you get that core nucleus of people who take a dislike to a player, that slowly but surely sort of radiates, doesn't it? You know, and you know, as a player, that's really difficult, I think, to overcome. You know, and some do, but I'm sure there's plenty of players and relevant careers that have been affected quite severely by that. Do you know what I mean? And some players probably still carry it with them now.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they do. They must do, especially now with the power of social media now, where you know it's so wrong. Like because you can have an account and nobody really know who you are. Like you can hide behind a fake profile, like racist abuse, homophobic abuse. It's outrageous, some of the stuff that's just in public domain.
I think you know, if I was a player now, I would take myself off of social media altogether. You know, and if my son does ever, you know, play at any level, I would certainly be saying the same thing to him. You know, because you know, obviously back in my day it was forums. You know, the forum is this and the forum is that. Like, I mean, you know. And I had a player last season with me at the football club at Swindon Supermarine, where I coach, come up to me and said, "Oh, you know, so-and-so said this on the..." I'm like, don't even read it. Like, do you know what I mean? Do not even entertain that. Don't even let it enter your headspace, you know, because you don't know who this person is. You know what I mean? He could be a 45-year-old virgin living in his mum's house. which again, you could say is me being out of order by kind of describing him like that. But what my point is what does his opinion matter?
Yeah.
You know, he's never kicked the ball in anger. You know, if one of the coaching staff comes to you and say, "Look, I think you could have done this better or done that," you know, listen to them and try and take on board, because they're trying to do it for your best interest. Not, you know, Malcolm who's sitting in his bedroom typing on his laptop, like, do you know what I mean? You know,
no, 100%.
You know, that's the difference, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I think ultimately a lot of frustration comes from with fans is they probably don't admit it, but deep down, footballers are playing their dreams. Yeah, they're living their dreams. Absolutely. So they almost probably don't realise it, but their frustrations are coming out that way.
Yeah, you know, and I think that's my point. Really, is I think that absolutely. You know, no question. Everybody has those moments where they F and Jeff and, you know, curse somebody. You know, I just hope that after what's gone on, and especially with, you know, Southend and Chris and that, you know, that thought process maybe is just changed a little bit, you know, just a little bit, you know, because I think that will benefit everybody in that. Yeah. I mean, I'll try not to go into too much, because obviously I know the full background to it, but in terms of, you know, the kind of a general overview, I was with Chris 48 hours before. We had dinner together.
Fucking hell.
You know, he was a little bit down about a couple of things that I'd not heard him talk like that before, because he was quite a strong archetypal Yorkshireman, like, you know, tight as anything, you know, didn't like spending his money, but at the same time was the most generous man you could ever wish to meet. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And, you know, I went home early that night, and I left him with our other friend and shook his hand and said, "Right, see you later, mate," you know. And if I'd have known that was the last time I was going to ever see him, I would have stayed till 3 a.m. I would have, you know what I mean? And all these things I've had to think about for the last 4 months, you know. But never, ever, ever did I ever think that he would do what he did. You know, I'm sure you know people in your life that you might go, okay, I could potentially see that person maybe doing that. You know, you could kind of imagine it almost. He was so far the other end of that scale to me. So that was the Saturday night. On New Year's Day, I was at my Swindon Supermarine game, and I'd been warming up on the pitch. and came into my phone. I happened to check my phone, and I had multiple missed calls, which is not many people call me like, but multiple missed calls on my phone from the couple of friends within our friend group. So that was alarm bells were ringing straight away. So I phoned back, and our friend who I'd left Chris with on the Saturday night said, "Have you heard from him in the last couple of days?" And I said, "No, not at all. You know, no, I've been busy. You know, I had work and I'm at the game, and I was going to give him a call later to see if he was all right. You know, because I knew he was a bit down about a couple of things." Okay, fine, all right, no worries. They can't find him. You know, he's gone missing, sort of thing. You know, put the phone down. Okay, let me know when you find him. Like, do you know what I mean? Just let me know. He's probably gone for a run with his dog. You know, because the dog was gone as well. Carried on getting changed from the warm-up kit to go and stand on the bench or sit on the bench there. And my son was with me. He's 16. And my phone went again. And I was told, you know, that he'd been found. And, you know, I don't think I've ever been more shocked in my life, you know. And my son was right in my eye line, so he saw my face obviously change. And, you know, whether I blacked out for a second, but certainly my memory of what happened next is not there, you know. But yeah, I've lost family members in my life, and, you know, from old age and illness, but they, you know, obviously it's a shock, but not in the sense of the shock that I had on New Year's Day.
No,
certainly, you know, and I mean that really was looking now. That was just the start of it, you know. It was a pretty horrendous few weeks, to be honest with you. Like I say, I think because of the type of character that he was. And maybe, you know, looking on the bigger picture, that was half the problem. Maybe, you know, he was, you know, that strong exterior. That, you know, I don't think I ever had a particularly deep conversation with him in the 10 years that I knew him. You know, it just wasn't the kind of conversation you have with Barks. You know, but I've got some amazing memories of firstly living with him for that season when we first met at Southend. And, you know, we went on holiday every summer since then. You know, and I would always look forward to our holidays, you know, and the 2, 3, 4 days, whatever it was we went for, was something that I would always kind of look forward to and aim for, you know what I mean? You know, and, you know, and even further beyond that, we'd always talked about Chris's dream was to own a bar in Spain one day, you know, to retire to Spain and have a bar. And we talked about it on the Saturday night. You know, we actually talked about it. And, you know, from a very selfish point of view, you know, I've lost that in my life. Do you know what I mean? I've lost that dream, that thing I would always aim for every year, and that longer term aim to, you know, potentially retire one day to Spain and you know, have a bar with him maybe. You know, yeah, just a devastating experience all round, really.
Oh, yeah,
and seeing what it's done to his family as well. You know, it's it just awful.
Yeah. Well, obviously, this week was supposed to be the game for him, like at the end of the season. How much were you sort of looking forward to that, really?
I've got to be honest. I think I was dreading it as much as I was looking forward to it, to be honest with you, because I think it would have been, no doubt that would have been a very difficult thing to do. You know, obviously would be there 100%. You know, no question. You know, the funeral was very emotional, and no doubt that would have been a similar experience to have walked out and played, you know, in his memory. Do you know what I mean? You know, and I hope that we can arrange it, you know, when things go back to normal, obviously, and probably realistically will probably be next season now, or next this time next year, I guess.
Probably will take a year, sadly.
You know, because a lot of the people involved in it will probably be with their own clubs, whether that's coaching or whatever. So to have the availability will be difficult. So it is a real shame, you know. And I hope that the effect out of it won't be lost through time, and that we can still make the most of it when we are able to do it, and hopefully raise some money. And more than anything, just honour him as a person. Do you know what I mean? And you know, I certainly won't let his memory die. And I think if there is one nice thing out of it, that he will always be young in my head when I'm old and grey and wrinkly and you know, false knees and hips. He will always be 39 in my head, you know, and he'll always look as he did that Saturday night when I last saw him, you know. Yeah, you know, he was such a great guy. You know, just a first class bloke. You know, I would often. He didn't like it when I used to say this, but you know what I found was when I met him, my career went down the toilet, but my social life went through the roof. You know, and only last year, you know, we were at an event together, and I said it in front of him, and he got a bit funny about it. Like he said, "You always say that. You always say that." Like, you know, and I was like, "Yeah, but I mean it." Like, do you know what I mean? You know, you know, but no, you know, I will always forever be grateful, you know, and there's times now when, you know, like this scenario now, you know, something will happen and I've done it a couple of times, picked the phone up to call him, to tell him about it. And you're like, no, I can't, like, do you know what I mean? You know, and that's a shame.
Yeah. No, I think what you were saying there, you hope the value in doing this charity game isn't lost over the time. I actually hope, and I do think it will actually add to it. I think because of what happened, because it got postponed through nobody's fault.
Yeah.
I think when it does happen, I think it could potentially make it a bigger event.
Hopefully, you know, whatever we can do to promote it or whatever it needs to be, you know. Also, I know that Chris at the paper had put a lot of effort into it, and you know, fair play to him. You know, from what I've seen and the outpouring of affection for him, you know, I'm confident it will be, you know, it will be good. You know, it's just you know, it's just a hope, really. You know, just a hope that it will still be as thing. He would hate it, by the way. He would absolutely hate the idea of it. You know, he was not somebody that would, you know, blow his own trumpet, you know, or like any kind of unnecessary attention, you know. So the very thought of a game being played in his honour wouldn't sit particularly comfortable with him, I don't think, to be honest with you.
So did you meet him at Southend? Is that when you first met him?
Yeah. So he turned up, obviously. I don't know if the season had started or what, I don't know. I'd already rented this place. I can't remember the name of the square, but in Westcliff, there's a bowling green with houses that run around it. And there's like a cafe attached to the bowling green.
I think I do know what you mean, but I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, I can't remember now myself. But we had I had an apartment over 2 floors that looked out onto this bowling green. And as you know, rent's quite expensive in Southend. So he turned up and we just got talking. We were up north somewhere, like somewhere like Huddersfield or something like that. And he turned up and I was about to go down to a garage to get a drink. And he said, "Oh, do you want to jump in my car? I'll take you down there." I was like, "Yeah, okay, like, do you know what I mean?" You know, and I'm not really one for mixing. I'm quite happy in my own company. I'm not, you know, I wasn't, you know, it's just the way I am, you know. Got in the car with him and just got talking. And, you know, it you know, sounds a bit soppy like, but you know, people say about when they meet a woman and they know. It was almost like that with him, you know, that we just got on straight away. And I think I'm quite straight talking. He's certainly very straight talking. And we just got, I guess the subject of where you're going to live came up. I said, "Look, I've just rented this place. It's really nice. Why don't you just come and rent a spare room and split the rent with me?" Like, so you're doing me a favour. And he was like, "Yeah, okay." Like, you know, and he came round, I think a couple of days later. He was like, "Yeah, fine. You know, yeah, move in." But the funny story was, so I'd moved in with some of my furniture. My wife at the time, my son had stayed in Swindon because just keep my son in school and everything else. So I had this 2-seater, like, leather sofa. So we came in, and, like, the first night, he sat down and I sat down, and this sofa, he's quite a big guy and I'm a fairly big guy, and we were just sat like that on this sofa, like, this ain't going to work, like, do you know what I mean? You know, he's like, no. He said, well, we need to go and get a sofa. So the next day we walked down, because this road would then take you to almost to the top of town. So walked down there, and it's like this Heart Foundation charity shop.
Yeah,
you went, that's good. We'll go in there. I was like, right, okay. So there was this floral, like, sofa that obviously some old deer had died on or something, you know. It was in the window. And we go in there, and like, as I said, he was a Yorkshireman. He was really generous in a lot of ways, but he wouldn't waste his money, like, you know what I mean? He would buy you dinner, no problem, but he wouldn't just go and waste his money, like, you know. So we go in there, and he says to the woman, "Can I have that?" And she's like, "Yeah, fine," you know. She's like, when would you like it? He's like, no, we'll take it now. And the woman's face was like, what? He's like, no, we're going to take it now. She's like, we haven't got any delivery. He said, no, we'll carry it out. So I've looked at him like, what? So we've then had to, like, you know, like Chuckle Brothers got this massive sofa. Like, it was an old sofa. It's like 3-seater sofa. We're walking up the road carrying this sofa, me and him. I'm like, and he's like shoving me with it, and I'm trying to walk with my hands turned around the other way.
Are you walking backwards?
Yeah, back up the road to this the apartment we'd rented, or flat we'd rented. But we had to sit down a couple of times. So you imagine this picture of me and him sat on this floral sofa on the part of the main road, just sat there like blowing out of our arseholes, you know, trying to get this sofa back. But then we had to get it up the stairs to the front door, then up the stairs into the first floor of where the front door of this apartment. And so you had me on my one and him on his one, and he nicknamed it Betty. So at training, he couldn't wait to get home to get on Betty and have a cuddle, like, with Betty. And he was notorious. And it was funny because at the funeral, you get talking to people, and he lived with a couple of other guys. He was notorious for getting a couple of orange Lucasades. He loved orange Lucasade. And if he got home first, you'd walk into this flat and it'd be like a sauna, because he'd whack the thermostat right up to the maximum, and he'd be asleep on the sofa. He'd drunk a bottle of, like, orange Lucasade, and it was like, you know, it was like tropical in this flat. And I'm like, you're not even paying towards the bills, like, do you know what I mean? You know, you're running the thermostat to the max. But that was him, like, do you know what I mean? You know, and that was how we lived for that season, like, you know. And I have to say, it was brilliant, like, you know. I just loved it. It was absolutely brilliant. I mean, we spoke every Thursday because that was his day off from coaching at Forest Green, and that's my day off in the job that I do now. So invariably we'd speak every Thursday. And I'd seen a lot more of him recently because my son had been on trial at Forest Green, as I said. I'd seen him a lot at games and that, you know. But we obviously had to keep sort of a bit of a distance because he didn't want it to look like it was favouritism.
Yeah.
My son was there, you know. So I tried to keep my distance, and he didn't really want to be seen to be talking to me too much, which was absolutely fine. I totally understood that, you know.
It's 8 o'clock. Everyone's clapping outside my window.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. So, you know, I'd like to think I knew him well. Do you know what I mean? You know, and it was tough because obviously I'd found out on the day, but then had like the next sort of 24, 48 hours with a lot of people who knew that he and I were friends contacting me, thinking they were telling me something I didn't already know. You know. So that was quite tough. You know, having to have those conversations with people and having to be the person to tell some other people as well, you know, you know, I think there's the core group of us who go away every year, and we've just tried to approach everything of what would he have wanted us to do? Do you know what I mean? What would he have wanted? And just try to make every decision related to the funeral and everything we've done since. With that kind of thought process in mind, you know. So
first Southend captain to the captaincy at Wembley.
Is he really?
Yeah, so he's gone down the history books for that. Because it's one of the sort of images Southend tweeted at the time when it happened was him leading the team out, and it's just sort of it is I can't remember the game we had. What is? Can you remember the game we had after when we had the minutes to pause?
Tranmere.
We played Tranmere at home, and it's got to the
really annoyingly. I weren't there. No, I weren't there. It really pissed me off. It was kind of the only thing I wanted to go for.
Yeah, it was either the 23rd minute for his number or the 39th minute.
Yeah.
And the whole ground stood up and applauded. And it sort of really got to you, really. It was one of them.
Yeah.
I've never seen the ground like that before.
I wasn't able to go. I got asked to go, but I couldn't go for one reason. But then I went to a Cardiff Swansea game after he passed away, and some of his family were there as well. So I was grateful to be invited. And they did a thing before the game, and even now just said that there, and the hairs on the back of my neck have gone right, you know. And to see a whole stadium like that, and obviously the Cardiff Stadium's on a bit of another level, isn't it?
Yeah.
Stand up and applaud for your mate. Do you know what I mean? Forget the player element and the teammate element. To do that for your mate, your friend, that was incredible. Really, like, do you know what I mean? You know,
it's something I've never seen at Southend before. Put it that way,
really, and that's great. You know, that's fantastic, and you know, and fair play to all the people that are taking the time to do that. You know, it's a fantastic thing in honour of him, isn't it? You know, I mean, I think players like Chris, what they're able to do is drag people with them. Do you know what I mean? You know, and that isn't just on a 90-minute game. It's in training every day. You know, he would pull people up, you know, within training. You know, and demand of people generally. You know, and that was why I was personally really keen for my son to perhaps get something at Forest Green, knowing that he would then be with Chris for a couple of years. You know. Not from a coaching point of view, but I just knew he would make him a better man, you know, a better person, because he would tell me stories of what he'd have the young lads at Forest Green doing, you know, sweeping out the minibus and this, that, and the other, like, you know, and not because he wanted to be an arsehole, but because he wanted them to do it right. Do you know what I mean? And all these little things that matter, you know. So, you know, he's a big loss to coaching as well. You know, he's a big loss to. You know, to see how upset his youth team boys were at the funeral, you know, was heartbreaking, you know, because, you know, he obviously had made a great impact on them in a short period of time, you know, and you know, they were deeply affected by his death as well, you know, and just goes to show the mark of the man, you know. He was never an apprentice. So he never had an apprenticeship. He was working as a lifeguard in a swimming pool in Barnsley, playing local football. You know, so he was very grounded. You know, very, very grounded in that sense that, you know, he got into the game late, but did very, very well out of it. You know, so he had those standards and those personal level. You know, just because that was who he was. Do you know what I mean? Not because he'd been. His PE teacher spoke at his funeral at the service afterwards, at the public service, and he gave a fantastic speech about Chris and how he was as a kid, you know, within PE lessons and school teams, and how he would obviously have to compete with his older brother, you know, and that how he fought to have his own identity and not be Richie's brother. You know, he was his own man, you know. Yeah. And his dad was a really good runner as well, apparently. You know, so you can see that the ground he got from his family, and without divulging too much, I think the loss of both his parents was a major factor in his life. Do you know what I mean? As it would be for anybody, but I mean, in terms of what he ultimately decided to do, you know, I think the loss of his parents at a relatively young age, you know, had a deep effect that I don't think even his closest friends were aware of, you know. So I think that was his driving force, you know, as well as his daughter, and you know, he just had very high personal standards, you know. And one of my biggest regrets personally is that he never saw me at my best. You know, he never saw me in my prime as a player. Now he probably couldn't give a toss about that. Do you know what I mean? Because he treated everybody as he found them, you know. But it's something I've thought about a lot. You know, we never talked about it. Do you know what I mean? You know, but I really wish he'd played with me when I was at the height of my game. You know, not when he saw me at Southend when I wasn't. You know, and like I said, it probably would never have affected our friendship. It's just a real personal thing to me, because I would have loved for him to have really respected me on a player level, having seen me at my best. And he did. I had no question he didn't respect me at all. But just a personal rankle of mine, really. Like, do you know what I mean? You know, I guess probably says more about me than it does about him, really.
As an actual on-the-field teammate, what was he like then?
Yeah, pretty ruthless. Like, you know, although we were living together, he bollocked me a couple of times. Yeah, he was just somebody, you know, that it's a well-used and overused phrase about, you know, being in the trench with somebody, or being in, you know, he is definitely somebody you'd want in a trench with you, or in a situation, you know. You know, I would trust him, you know, to the absolute maximum. Like, do you know what I mean? You know, no question whatsoever. It's difficult because obviously my memories of him have kind of merged into the personal memories I've got of him. You know,
yeah.
And the time I've known him as a person far outweighs the time I knew him as a teammate. Do you know what I mean? But he was somebody that you just knew that he was giving everything he had. Do you know what I mean? You know, and if he was injured, he was injured. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, you know, it's a bit sore and I might give it a miss. If he didn't play, it was because he was struggling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of player. And I think you only have to read some of the tributes of other players that played with him, or talking to people at the funeral afterwards. You know, that wasn't a one-off thing. That was something he did throughout his career, and why he had the career that he had. You know.
Yeah. That's the one for me. It was reading other players talking about him as well. You realise that across the board, wherever he played, he was respected by a lot of people.
What I thought was even more interesting, though, is the amount of people, the amount of non-playing staff that really talked highly of him. You know, he was probably far happier going and talking to the kit man in the kit room, having a cup of tea with him, as he was talking to the star striker or the star player. Because I think Chris was very much more of that level, where he was, you know, he cared about people, you know, and he took a vested interest in people. You know, and, you know, if he knew somebody was struggling, or, you know, or whatever, you know, I heard him offer people money or lend them money. You know, I've heard him do that on many occasions. You know, to give you another example, one of our circle of friends is Ian Lanning, who's now the MK Dons kit man. He was the Cardiff kit man for like 10 years. And that's where he first met Chris, when Chris signed for Cardiff. And Ian lived in his house in Cardiff, rent-free, for up until, you know, like 4 or 5 years ago, just because Chris knew he was struggling, because he was based in Bath, and he just looked after Chris's house while he was off playing elsewhere. And Chris never took a penny of any kind of rent or anything from him, you know, because he knew that helped Ian out, you know, and he must have lived in his house for 10 years, like, do you know what I mean, without paying him a penny. But that's the kind of guy that he was, you know.
Yeah. Genuine bloke.
Absolutely,
yeah.
It's like I've got a towel, and it's very small, but it's just I used to do a bit of media work for the club, and it was when we got to that cup final we mentioned, where Chris was the first Wembley captain. The club wanted to put together a little behind-the-scenes video or whatever, and it was one day down at the training grounds. Like we interviewed him, and that was the first time I met him. And any time I saw him after that, he'd say hello to me. He'd never walk past me after that without saying hello, or like morning, whatever. And it was something so small, but it's just that he's gone to the effort. It's like he's learnt my name, and he doesn't have to do that at all. And he'd never walk past you.
But that, and again, you know, that wasn't something that was contrived. You know, that was just him. Do you know what I mean? You know, and you know, it's difficult for me to not kind of wax lyrical about the guy. Do you know what I mean? You know, because obviously I and it's just nice that other people experience the kind of fella that he was. Do you know what I mean? Within the last couple of days, our group of friends that I mentioned, we bought a greyhound. So we bought a greyhound and we're going to name it after Chris, but we're not. The name hasn't been decided yet.
Right.
I mean, it's got 4 legs, so we've got half a chance. It's got to go through. I'm new to this, but it's got to go through this trial apparently, and it's going to run at Hove. So when we've decided on the name and it gets through the certification to race, I'll try and make that a bit more public. But you know, any kind of, we're going to obviously try and make any winnings or any earnings, you know, to get them to the charity. Hopefully, you know, so hopefully people will be able to get behind that and give a bit of a focal point really, and hopefully for his family and that as well. Do you know what I mean? Just something just to kind of, you know, bring a smile to their faces more than anything. But you know, something maybe people can get behind if it gets to the stage where it's allowed to chase the bunny around the track.
That's a great idea. I'm sure we can get behind that as well. We can put some things out there about that as
That's
well.
great.
Actually, before we do go, actually, we've always got to ask this question because everyone that played with him seems to have their own Bill Moshney story. I'm wondering if you have one.
Oh God, yeah. How have I forgotten about this?
Yeah, but can you picture the scene of Barks and Bilal? You know what I mean? You've got like.
This is why I need to ask that question, because I can just imagine Barker pulling his hair out, but at the same time just
pulling Bilal's hair out.
But
yeah. I mean, wow, what a yeah. he is. I say I nearly had a 20-year career, and he probably is one of the more unique characters that I came across. You know, is he being linked with the club again now?
He was training with Grimsby, but this was obviously before the coronavirus. So
right, yeah. I mean, in normal circumstances, what a lovely guy. Do you know what I mean? You know, the most placid, nice chap you could ever wish to meet. You know, would bring his prayer mat. We'd have to wait for him to pray to Mecca before we could leave on the coach and that sort of thing. You know, and all that. You know, but then there's probably a medical term for it, but he would literally flip a switch. I think there was this. You may have heard this story, but have you heard the scissors story?
Yeah.
Chasing and going to follow the coach down the motorway.
I'm not sure.
I don't think we've heard that much. We've heard as
No.
much that he was like trying to obviously stab a Leyton Orient player with some scissors.
Yeah, well, this might be wrong, but my memory of it was then he was going to his car to follow their coach back to wherever they were going back to again. But you know, I walked in. I can't remember if I played that night or not. I can't remember if I played, but I remember walking back in the change room and 2 or 3 lads being lying on top of him, literally like bundling him just to try and keep him where he was, you know, and him having these scissors in his hand, like, you know, you're like, fuck, you know. I have no doubt if he'd have got out of there, he would have stabbed him. No question.
No doubt.
You don't think he's someone that was either got there and like he might have bottled it a little bit?
No. He'd have gone for his jugular. The guy would have been dead. I can't remember who it was. Who was the player? Do you know who the player was?
Lee Martin, I think it was, wasn't it? Little winger.
Yeah, the guy. I mean, obviously Bilal was susceptible to being wound up, you know, and I remember the games that I played. I preferred going, Bilal, all right, calm down, like, you know, calm down. But yeah, fuck me, what, like moments of like genius, but then like, you know, as a manager, I don't know whether you would ever take the risk of playing him just because of you'd run the risk of playing with 10 men every week. Like,
I think that's what's always held him back. So no doubt he had bags of ability, but yeah, as you say, just a ticking time bomb.
Well, I remember when my vague memory of him turning up at the training ground and thinking, like, you know, because obviously as a footballer you get lots of trialists to turn up, and he turned up and he was like, oh, fuck, you know, here's another one, and never thinking that he would amount to anything, like, do you know what I mean? You know, and then next thing we signed him, and I'm like, you know, and then he was playing, and it was like all of a sudden it kind of clicked, like, do you know what I mean? You know, and like. Where does he go after that? I have to say, I stepped away from him and haven't really followed it that much. But where did he go?
He had, do you know what? We should have sold him to West Ham. I think I can't remember the amount, but West Ham actually bid for him, and we got greedy and they told us to do one eventually. He ended up at
Ron Martin
Ipswich.
got greedy.
Yeah.
Ron Martin got greedy.
Can't imagine that.
Wow, no.
But he went on loan to Ipswich, which was obviously a
Right.
step up.
Yeah, that was because he actually went AWOL for a bit, didn't he?
Yeah, he
Went AWOL
disappeared.
from Southend, which is why we loaned him out. And just to
Right.
finish him up quickly, it got to about February time. We had an injury crisis. So bearing in mind we hadn't seen him all season. It was like breaking news Friday night. Bilal's back. He's going to be in a squad. Sorry, he's going to be starting. So we were playing. I think it was Northampton at home, and about 10 minutes in, he got a straight red.
He got sent off.
He literally 2-footed someone's neck, I think, and then
Yeah.
straight sent off, and then that was it. So
But he's played for Rangers. Got involved in a fight at
Yeah,
Rangers.
I remember seeing that. I couldn't believe it. There's people. I think there's people I play in my career, and you go, "How have they got that move?" You know, and you're almost a bit like bastard, like, you know, and they're probably earning a load of money, you know. But then, yeah, incredible, isn't it? Incredible.
and he had played for Tunisia. Am I right in saying that?
Oh yeah, played for Tunisia.
He ended up getting
International football.
Yeah, he got he was in the, you know, when you call up a squad for the World Cup, you have like a 30-man squad, then it gets trimmed down. He got in the 30-man squad for the last World Cup, but then got
nearly
cut.
went to a World Cup.
Nearly went to a World Cup.
Could have played against England.
Well, fair play to the guy. Do you know what I mean? You know, I don't want to sound bitter, but you know, fair play.
Yeah.
He was meant to be back for the game for Berks, wasn't he? He was meant to be there. So
Well, it'd have been nice to see him. It'd have been nice to see him playing a game. Hopefully, that he wouldn't have topped somebody in life. You know what I mean?
He'd still have got sent off.
He probably still would have been a memorial, like, you know, game. You know, a testimonial type game. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
I think
someone
he
like
could-
Bilal knows the difference.
I think he could have a fight with himself in a room on his own, probably, couldn't he? You know, I don't know. So, what do you think's going to happen with your club now?
it's all in the hands of Ron Martin by the looks of it.
Yeah, do you mean with everyone's clubs or us specifically? Because
Well-
we could quite easily go bust in if football was normal, but
Yeah,
Christ knows what's going to happen now.
yeah.
I really don't know.
It's you could be in a very fortunate position. Whereas if you were to escape relegation, you know what I mean.
It'd be incredible. We've joked about it, thinking like we've won 3 games all season. We've got 19 points.
So how would you feel then? How would you feel as a supporter if you escape relegation? Would that sit well with you?
You take it, but it would be a bit embarrassing.
Yeah, it would be I'd laugh at it, but I'd be embarrassed. I certainly wouldn't be celebrating it. It would be it would be highly embarrassing.
I think, unfortunately, you know, I mean, the club seemed a shambles when I was there. Do you know what I mean? At times, you know, and sort of that's my kind of recollection of it, you know. But I won't name him, but I spoke to somebody who works at the club a couple of nights ago, just because we've been in touch more since Barks passed away, and I got quite an interesting insight into what's been going on, like, you know. So
It has been a shambles, mate.
Yeah, sadly, it does seem like we've just gone back.
What's
in time.
what's the general consensus on Sol Campbell?
Do you know what?
He's
He's not been able to sign a player yet. We've been under a transfer embargo since he's been here. Couldn't do anything in January. The only signing we could make was an emergency loan keeper, and he played like 3 games. So you can't even really count that as his signing. We've been playing a development squad for the past 2 months that we could have played. Shipped out a load of the high earners in January. Had like the kids playing since then, and they were gradually improving. We were still losing the vast majority of the games, but we were getting hammered 4-5-0. We lost 7-1 earlier in the season. The kids were going out, and we were still losing, but it was far more respectable. So I think he's doing a reasonable job, Sol, with his hands tied behind his back.
The issue with him is because he's a bit of an oddball. Sometimes it seems he rubs people up the wrong way. So, you know, whether it's just because the kids are playing well because they're kids and they're taking opportunity, or whether he is making them better, I don't know. But
Interesting to be a fly on the wall there, wouldn't it? You know, to see how he's
yeah, definitely.
On paper, he's got all of the experience and know-how in the world, isn't he? But even from my experience, I know that doesn't always translate into somebody being a good coach. You know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We've had a strange 18 months, put it that way.
Yeah, we've had a very odd couple of years.
Yeah, as you can probably imagine, being at Southend yourself, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it,
No
especially
problem
for
at
the subject we've
Yeah,
talked
can
about.
tell that was quite emotional for you as well. So thanks very much for having a chat with us.
No problem at all. All right, thanks, guys.
Top man, mate.
Mate, all the best.
Bye-bye.
And hopefully whenever we can, whenever the game does get rearranged, we
yeah, come and find me. Yeah, please come and say hello. That'd be nice to meet you in person.
Yeah, definitely. Mate.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, guys.
Top man. See you later.
Cheers.